Salam sejahtera and a very good afternoon to all of you. For my FAScinate talk, I will be focusing on groundwater and the science and technology involved in underpinning its development. As a short introduction, I'm a fellow of ASM in the Science and Technology Development Industry discipline. I'm a groundwater specialist, having gained my hands-on knowledge and expertise while serving for 28 years in the then Geological Survey Department, Malaysia, which from 2001 became known as Jabatan Mineral dan Geoscience. I'm a professional geologist registered with the Board of Geologists, and I'm a fellow of the Institute of Geology Malaysia. I'm passionate about groundwater as I've seen during my groundwater work with the GSD how rural areas in Pahang and Negeri Sembilan, Terengganu and Melaka, especially during the 1992 drought, were without piped water. They would line up with pails like in Malacca to take water when we were flushing the well near the Terendak camp. This was a real eye-opener for me. Let me begin from the beginning. From as far back as more than 4,000 years ago, the Holy Scriptures found in the Sanatana Dharma of Hindu, Rig Vedas 749.2, in the Christian Deuteronomy 33:13, and in the Quran Al-Mu'minun 23:18. All these were showing that there was, the scriptures call for groundwater being made available for use by humanity. So there is a strong spiritual backing to using groundwater. Now, as a classic example of sustainable use of groundwater, allow me to highlight the famous Zamzam well, in existence and continuous use for some 4,000 years in Makkah. This is a classic example of an artesian flow when it was first discovered by the infant Ishmael, who started scraping the land with his feet while his mother Hajar ran 7 times back and forth between the 2 hills of Safa and Marwa looking for water. Although Zamzam water has been continuously used, this has not caused any subsidence of the ground to occur. It is just located some 20 meters east of the Kaaba. In a posting by Arif Sharifuddin on the well of Zamzam, he described that hydrogeologically the well is sited in the Wadi Ibrahim. Some 13.5 meters of the well is in sandy alluvium. It is lined with stone masonry except for the top meter, which has a concrete collar. Lower half is in the fractured diorite bedrock, and between the alluvium and the bedrock is a half-meter section of permeable weathered rock, which together with the alluvium forms the aquifer. Now, this is lined with stone. In the section that provides the main water entry into the well, recharge comes from rainfall in the Wadi Ibrahim as well as runoff from the local hills. Pumping tests at 8,000 liters per second for more than 24 hours allowed water table, which dropped from 3.23 meters to 12 meters, then to 13.39 meters. But after pumping stopped, the water level was back to 3.9 meters below the surface of the well in 11 minutes. So as mentioned earlier, when first found, it had artesian characteristics as the groundwater had flowed out instantaneously. Now, what is groundwater? Simply, it is water that flows continuously within the saturated zone. Now, just for the information of the viewers, there is much more groundwater than surface water on Earth, with some 30% occurring as groundwater versus 1% surface water. The hydrological cycle that governs the cyclical movement of water, groundwater provides at least 2/3 of stream discharge. So you can see how much of groundwater occurs and is available. Now, many countries use large amounts of groundwater, with some using 100% groundwater for their water supply. In Malaysia, Kota Bharu has been sourcing its water supply from groundwater since the 1930s. And after some 90 years of continuous use, Kota Bharu is not sinking despite the claims by naysayers. Malaysia is blessed with abundant water in the form of rainwater and groundwater, which is renewed or recharged from rainwater with 5 times more groundwater than the annual rainfall. However, we use less than 5% of our groundwater wealth for domestic, agricultural, and industrial users. Misinformation in the media is a contributory factor to the low use. These are just some of the misinformation and misconceptions appearing in our local media. So, which we have attributed to media, which refers to it as experts. So, to dispel misinformation on groundwater, allow me to go into the science and technology aspects underpinning groundwater exploration and development. The S&T approach is indicative of how structured groundwater development is. So the science, in developing various technologies, especially when groundwater drilling and pumping is undertaken, fluid mechanics equations that underpin groundwater flow come into the picture. And the science, the standard groundwater terminology such as confined and unconfined aquifers, and a brief description of the geology of aquifers like the Zamzam well is an example. So now let me go on to the use of technology to prove the science. So use of remote sensing and GIS to delineate groundwater prospects as shown in the groundwater work undertaken in the Kampung Ulu Inas area in Kuala Pilah. So this was done by the agency Remote Sensing Malaysia. Now, insofar as the technology is concerned, the use of aerial photography is one example to identify the geology and related structures, the morphology, the regional information of river basins and catchment areas, land use information, agriculture management, urban planning, and therefore most suitable for selecting groundwater drill targets. The technology now, insofar as geophysical tools are concerned, both airborne and ground geophysics, the first image on top shows that of using resistivity survey to determine the profile of the geology structure, and the second image below it shows the transient electromagnetic survey down to depths of 500 meters to determine the profile of the geology structure, and potential groundwater aquifers may be detected using both systems. We also use airborne geophysical tools. The example shown is the total magnetic intensity map and potassium count map to show up the geological structures at depth and also clay-rich areas. Since once potential sites are located, the drilling team moves in. The image shows a type of drilling rig used, the drill rods, and the 2 types of drill bits used prior to drilling of the tube well. The tube well will then be flushed using compressed air to remove sediments and drill mud before pumping tests are done, generally during the dry season when the water table is low. The water table is allowed to recover first. Now, I'll go through, show you some images now of the pumping test. These 3 types of pumping tests are undertaken: step pumping, constant discharge, and recovery tests. All of these tests give much information on the aquifer. And the V-notch tank that we use, shown on the right-hand side, is used to determine the groundwater discharge. And the appropriate submersible pump is calibrated using this amount of water that is found. So we have done some groundwater pumping tests, and at the same time it gives information on aquifer characteristics as well as the optimum discharge rate to be recommended to be pumped. It is therefore abundantly clear that hydrogeologists undertake groundwater exploration and development through extensive use of S&T, and they do not develop groundwater blindly. Also, JMG had developed SOPs for groundwater exploration and development, which is to be followed to the letter. Furthermore, some state governments have enacted state laws requiring the State Water Resources Authority to give prior approval to these parties interested in developing groundwater. So these are some of the equations that we use, as well as the pumping test. And now you can see on the left is a schematic of a tube well going down into the aquifer. The way forward, I've identified four main categories of strategies that are recommended for groundwater to be developed. These cover governance, research, state action plans, and data repository, and public engagement by JMG. So you can see all those four categories of strategies listed there. With all the negative stories in the media, the investors investing in the local mineral water industry remain undaunted as they are advised by knowledgeable groundwater experts. In 2019, 698 million ringgit was the worth of the value attributed to mineral water industry. To date, there are 24 licensees supplying bottled mineral water in various brands. Let me now move on to planetary health and groundwater. The planet's waterways, which have been overexploited and polluted by countries worldwide. Just 1/3 of the world's rivers remain free-flowing. The rest have been dammed or otherwise disrupted. Although the Earth still has an abundance of water, chronic misuse and abuse will lead to 3.6 billion people worldwide without safe access to it by 2050. We therefore need to ensure our water resources, both surface and groundwater, are not polluted by our own actions and will continue to serve our future generations. In summary, I have outlined 3 important points as follows. Media are requested to consult genuine groundwater experts or hydrogeologists for national groundwater information and status. Do away with fake news and misinformation on groundwater. The names and contacts are available from Jabatan Mineral dan Geoscience, or they are registered with the Board of Geologists or are members of the Institute of Geology Malaysia. Now, with a groundwater policy and federal law and enactments and regulations in place in a number of states, groundwater can be developed safely and sustainably for domestic, industrial, and agricultural use. We therefore need a specific groundwater policy to govern groundwater use. Finally, what we need to address is not if we should pursue development of groundwater resources, but whether we can afford not to, more so with an incoming impact of climate change. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.